Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. There's a kind of mythic grief embedded in the soil of Terra, a weight that settles in your chest the moment you imagine standing beneath its ash-choked skies. This is not simply the birth world of humanity, nor just the seat of an imperium spanning a million worlds. Terra is older than memory and heavier than truth. It is built on corpses, drowned in gold, and fed daily with the marrow of the galaxy. And yet, somehow, impossibly, it endures. What if its survival is not just stubborn resilience or the Emperor's divine will? What if Terra is made of something we do not understand, a secret substance, physical or immaterial, that has allowed it to become not just the heart of an empire, but a monument of cosmic permanence? This is the mystery we're going to explore. A journey not just into stone and history, but into the essence of a world that may no longer be a planet at all. Long before the Emperor's golden legions marched across its blasted plains, Terra was already ancient. Not just old in the sense of civilization, but in the geological, mythic sense. A place whose bones had been scorched and reforged 1,000 times over. We know fragments, whispers of the age of strife, and even less of the eras before. The time before the Emperor is cloaked in radiation fog, techno-barbarian myth, and the erasure of catastrophic war. What remains is a planet both suffocating and bottomless, as if every civilization that rose here only layered more rot over the last. It's easy to forget that once, Terra was Earth. The blue world, jewel of the Sol system, cradle in life, philosophy, and the first shudders of humanity's machine-born ambitions. But by the time the Emperor rose in the thunderous silence of a collapsing age, Earth was no longer Earth. Centuries of war, pollution, orbital bombardment, and artificial climate intervention had stripped away its natural face. The seas had risen and receded in tides of death. The continents were fragmented by orbital strikes and tectonic weaponry. And what remained was a planet that bore little resemblance to its past. A continent-sized scar, ruled by warlords with plasma-crowned thrones and armies of cybernetic mutants. Historians, or what passes for them in the Imperium, refer to this time as the Age of Strife. But that label is almost quaint. It was a descent into techno-feudal horror, where knowledge was both currency and curse. Genetic war machines roamed the irradiated wastes. Cities fused with AIs and their death throes became tombs of glass and steel. The men and women who clawed power from the bones of old Earth were not saviors, they were predators, carving up what was left of a dying cradle. And beneath their boots, the very substance of Terra was being altered. Not by science or intention, but by entropy and despair. The question that haunts this period is what was lost? There are hints, tantalizing, maddening hints, that before the Emperor's rise, something happened to Terra's foundation. Entire continental vaults were sealed and forgotten. Mechanisms the size of mountain ranges went silent, their purpose and creators unknown. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus, with their fetishistic devotion to the past, treat pre-Emperor Terra as a heresy zone. A time and place so chaotic and unnatural that even machine memory refuses to comprehend it. What could make logic itself break down? What could remain buried beneath the palace that predates the Emperor and resists all understanding? Some fringe theories, whispered in the darker corners of inquisitorial archives, suggest that during this period, Terra was infiltrated by extragalactic forces. Not aliens in the Xeno sense, but entities or technologies so far removed from human comprehension that they altered the fundamental laws of what Terra is. Certain techno-barbarian tribes were said to worship machines that bled when opened. Others fought wars over breathing stone, rock that pulsed like flesh. There were entire ecosystems that functioned like circuits, forests of silicon and bone. None of this can be confirmed, of course, but the madness of old Earth lingers in these echoes, and the soil remembers. This was the Earth the Emperor found, not a throne to ascend, but a world to conquer from the bottom up. He did not simply unite Terra's surface, he excavated it, waging war against the very past. The techno-barbarian lords were not just warlords. Some were proto-Astartes experiments gone wrong. Others had fused with warp entities or ruled over databanks that had become semi-sentient cultures in their own right. The Emperor had to cleanse them with fire and psychic might. But in doing so, he didn't merely erase rivals, he buried the past beneath new foundations. Entire regions were sealed by cyclopean vault doors that no living force has reopened since. There's a terrible idea buried in all this, that even the Emperor, with all his foresight and psychic brilliance, was not entirely sure what Terra was anymore. That when he set out to unify it, he was also trying to understand it. That his conquest was as much an exorcism as it was a political act. Perhaps that's why the Imperial Palace sprawls so monstrously, not merely to house a god emperor, but to lock something else in. And yet the old Terra still pulses beneath. You can see it in the bones of the world. In catacombs that predate recorded time, in vaults with materials that defy analysis, in tectonic layers that don't correspond to any known natural process. When you walk the dust of Terra, you walk on forgotten gods, broken dreams, and perhaps something even worse, memories too dangerous to be named. And that's only the beginning. When the Emperor took control of Terra, he did not merely conquer a people, he inherited a dying world on the edge of unraveling. And then, somehow, impossibly, he began to reshape it. Not through brute force alone, but with an alchemy of science, psychic mastery, and something darker. A transformation that defies easy comprehension. The great unspoken truth about the Emperor's terraforming is that it wasn't just about fixing a broken planet. It was about building something new, something that could hold the weight of a coming empire and survive the psychic howling of the galaxy. The Unification Wars left more than blood and ashes in their wake. As his Thunder Warriors smashed through hive kingdoms and vaporized entire cultures, the Emperor was enacting a deeper plan. His legions were not just destroying, they were excavating. Beneath the surface-level conquest was a meticulous, almost surgical manipulation of the planet itself. Some archives, forbidden and nearly mythic, suggest that the Emperor had unearthed ancient nodes of power hidden deep within Terra, perhaps from the dark age of technology or even older. These nodes, according to whispers, weren't simply machines. They were something akin to anchors, not just physical, but metaphysical, tying Terra's material plane to something else. Something deeper. The atmosphere was the first thing he changed. Toxic clouds that had blackened the skies for centuries began to recede in zones under Imperial control. Artificial weather systems were installed across key regions, not just to provide rainfall or control temperature, but to cleanse the psychic echo that had built up during the Age of Strife. It's said that some of the barbarian warlords had weaponized despair itself, embedding psychic residue into the very wind and rain. The Emperor had to root this out not just with machines, but with his own mind, scouring the skies with golden light, rewriting the heavens atom by atom. He didn't stop with the sky. The crust of Terra, already fractured by orbital bombardment and subterranean wars, was stabilized through means that defy even Mechanicus comprehension. There are regions near the Imperial Palace where gravity behaves in subtle, imperceptible ways, slightly too strong or too weak, as if the laws of physics were rewritten in microcosm. These changes aren't the result of standard planetary engineering. They are something else. Something that required a being like the Emperor, who could see the strands of reality itself, to implement. Some believe he infused Terra's very matter with warp-resistant lattices, psychic meshworks embedded in the bedrock to shield against corruption. If true, it means that parts of Terra are no longer entirely natural. In the traditional sense, they are engineered realities, hybrid zones where warp and matter blur into something new. Then there is the palace itself, the most massive architectural undertaking in human history. But calling it a palace misses the point. It is a continent-spanning mechanism, a labyrinth of machine, memory, and ritual. Some scholars believe it functions as a stabilizer, anchoring not just the Emperor's body but the planet itself within a fixed psychic resonance. That might explain why the custodies speak of the lower levels not in terms of rooms or chambers, but in layers, as if descending through dimensions rather than depth. Some corridors are said to loop, physically impossible spaces where time slows or quickens, where footsteps echo back from before they were made. There are whispered theories that the Emperor built in countermeasures far beneath the surface. Entire mechanisms designed to prevent Terra from becoming untethered from real space in the event of catastrophic warp breaches. After all, the planet now houses the Astronomicon, the most powerful psychic beacon in existence. It is not impossible that the Emperor foresaw the risk that Terra itself might be drawn into the immaterium if left unfortified. His modifications may have been the only thing keeping it grounded, literally. And yet, not everything was sanitized. Not every horror was erased. In fact, some believe the Emperor intentionally preserved certain zones, corrupted fault lines, buried catacombs, and ancient sites of unknown power. Perhaps he could not destroy them. Perhaps he needed them, or perhaps he feared what would be unleashed by total erasure. Whatever the reason, there are entire regions within Terra's bedrock that are off-limits, even to the High Lords. These are zones where the Emperor's will did not overwrite the past, but merely contained it, a quarantine, not a cure. All of this suggests a terrifying possibility, that the Emperor's terraforming was not simply physical, but ontological. He wasn't rebuilding a planet, he was reprogramming reality. And in doing so, he may have altered the very essence of what Terra is. Not just stone and sky, but a substrate for empire, a sacred machine in planetary form, a foundation strong enough to bear the throne of a god. And maybe, just maybe, he discovered that the planet had already begun this transformation long before he arrived, that he was not its creator, but its steward. And if that's true, then what exactly is Terra becoming? The Golden Throne is not just a prison. It is not merely a technological marvel, or even a psychic beacon of unfathomable power. It is a wound, open, endless, and pulsing with the raw light of the warp. And it is seated at the heart of Terra, radiating outwards like the eye of some apocalyptic storm. For 10,000 years, the Emperor's shattered body has been entombed within this nightmare engine, and with each passing moment, the throne bleeds its influence into the planet around it. This isn't just metaphoric. There are signs, evidence, physical and psychic, that Terra itself is being changed by the presence of the throne. Not as a side effect, as a metamorphosis. The Astronomicon is the most obvious result. A constant, blinding flame in the immaterium, visible to psychers across the Imperium, it guides ships through the darkness between stars. But few understand the cost. The energy to sustain it requires 1,000 psychers to be sacrificed each day. Their souls are torn apart, their essence burned to fuel a light that never dims. This agony doesn't vanish into the void. It is channeled through the throne, and thus into Terra. The psychic emissions alone should have shattered the crust, boiled the atmosphere, or twisted reality itself into impossible geometries. But none of this has happened. Instead, the planet has absorbed it, adapted to it, or worse, embraced it. There are signs near the palace walls, subtle but undeniable. Stone that sings when touched by certain frequencies. Subterranean chambers that defy conventional architecture, warping inwards upon themselves as if space were folding in quiet grief. Custodians tasked with long-term watch near the throne have reported dreams not their own, memories of places that do not exist, visions of Terra not as it is but as it was, or perhaps as it could be. These phenomena are not isolated. They are growing, expanding, slowly, silently, like roots beneath the soil. Some Mechanicus scribes, heretical and long since vanished, propose that Terra's mass is increasing, not from asteroid impacts or tectonic shifts, but from a thickening of matter near the palace, a densification of reality itself. If true, it would suggest that the Golden Throne is not merely broadcasting into the warp, it is drawing the warp in. And Terra, rather than rejecting this invasion, is changing to accommodate it, becoming something not quite physical, not quite immaterial. A hybrid, a bridge. This would explain the increasing number of psychic births near the surface of the throne. Entire hives built in concentric rings around the palace have reported exponential growth in psyker mutations, even among genetically stable lines. Normally, this would be attributed to proximity to the Astronomicon, but the rate of increase suggests something deeper, something environmental. The implication is horrifying, that Terra itself is becoming a psychic node, not just channeling warp energy but generating it, or worse, hunger for it. This might be why the Adeptus Custodes, for all their stoic silence, have become more active in recent millennia. They patrol zones beneath the palace more aggressively. Entire detachments have vanished into the depths without explanation. No reports, no returns, just silence. And in their wake, only rumors of things awakening beneath the crust, of walls that whisper, of metal that flows like mercury when no one is looking. Whatever lies beneath the throne is not dormant. It is becoming. Perhaps this was always the plan. Perhaps the Emperor, with his vast, incomprehensible foresight, designed the throne not merely to sustain his own psychic beacon, but to transform Terra itself into a new kind of entity. Not a planet, not a fortress, but a keystone in the galactic fabric. A god machine disguised as a homeworld. But perhaps not. There are theories, darker and less forgiving, which suggest the throne is failing, not just technologically, but metaphysically, that its containment fields are fraying, that the power being drawn into it is no longer controlled, that Terra is being warped, not as an act of will, but as an infection, that the line between real space and the immaterium is thinning with every year the Emperor remains entombed, that eventually Terra will no longer be part of the galaxy at all, but drift sideways into a nightmare realm of its own making. And the most disturbing theory of all, whispered in the deepest vaults of the Inquisition, denied even as it is recorded, is that this is exactly what the Emperor intended. That he knew the price of sustaining the Astronomicon, that he saw the death of gods and the birth of new ones, and that in binding himself to the throne, he did not just reshape humanity's fate, he began the rebirth of the planet itself. There is a contradiction that pulses at the core of Terra, a world that should be dead, yet somehow continues to live, not in beauty or fertility, but in a kind of persistent decay that never quite collapses. Terra has been stripped, mined, suffocated, and scorched for tens of thousands of years. Its oceans are gone or poisoned, its skies are clogged with smog and psychic residue. Billions live in hive towers that pierce the stratosphere, each layer built on the corpses of the one below. And yet Terra continues to give. Food is produced. Air is recycled. Resources, however scarce, are extracted in quantities that defy simple mathematics. Something about the planet sustains itself, and no one knows how. Officially, everything is imported. Agri-worlds across the segmentum solar funnel food into orbit, while forge worlds ship endless supplies of processed goods, minerals, and machinery. But the numbers do not add up. The Adeptus Administratum records show logistical gaps, quantities delivered that cannot possibly support the massive population still breathing, still working, still dying on the surface. And these gaps have persisted for millennia, growing wider with each passing century. The question is rarely asked aloud because the implications are too vast. But within the Mechanicus, among the dataseers and scrap code whisperers, there is a heretical hypothesis that Terra is being fed by something other than material imports. That something within the planet is regenerating what should be gone. One theory holds that during the Emperor's great transformation of Terra, a lattice of autogenerative systems was embedded deep beneath the crust. These machines, relics of the dark age of technology or perhaps even older, do not merely recycle waste. They reconfigure matter, changing atomic structures, transmuting decay into usable form. But there's a problem. No one has ever seen these systems in operation. They are referenced in fragmented texts and corrupted data slates, but every expedition into the underlayers has failed or vanished. If they exist, they are beyond the reach of current understanding, and perhaps intentionally hidden. More chilling are the accounts from sanitation crews and low-level Mechanicus tech priests who maintain the deep waste channels beneath the hives. Some describe soil that bleeds when pierced or emits warmth in zones far from any power source. There are rumors of fungi that convert rotting flesh into a nutrient paste, indistinguishable from rations. Entire sections of lower hive refuse dumps have been found mysteriously cleared, as if consumed from within. In one particularly disturbing report, an entire crew disappeared beneath a vault, labeled only Echo Zero. Their last transmissions spoke of walls that pulsed and a sound like breathing in the stone. Then there is the strange phenomenon of the atmospheric layers around the palace. Despite the concentration of exhaust, psychic bleed, and orbital traffic, the air remains surprisingly stable. No weather patterns, no acid rain, no corrosive winds. Some believe artificial systems are in place, but no visible structures support this. Others whisper that the atmosphere itself is being recycled by something beneath the surface, that gases are drawn in and exhaled back with subtle, near-organic precision. If true, it suggests not machines, but a living mechanism, something embedded in Terra's body that mimics the respiratory systems of a creature. And still, the resources flow. Minerals are mined from depths that should have long since collapsed. Rare earth elements, necessary for complex cogitator cores and psychic dampeners, are extracted from seams that appear to replenish over time. Some of these sites are under constant Mechanicus watch, yet they cannot explain the slow, steady regrowth of materials. The only conclusion they will admit, silently with fear, is that the ground itself is changing, repairing, regenerating. Not everyone accepts this. Among the ecclesiarchy, the explanation is spiritual. Terra survives because the Emperor wills it. His divine presence, even in death, sanctifies the planet and ensures its endurance. But even they have begun to hedge their proclamations. Some of their own sacred sites have begun to manifest anomalies: statues that weep oil, walls that hum during Mass, soil that refuses to stay buried. There is a growing belief, even among secular minds, that Terra is no longer just a location. It is a process, a kind of planetary transmutation. Not alchemy in the ancient sense, but something grander, a shift in purpose, in nature, in essence, that the very molecules of the planet are being rewritten, not entirely by machines, not entirely by the warp, but by a fusion of the two. An emergent system, older than any civilization, accelerated by the Emperor's presence, and now beyond anyone's control. And perhaps that's the point. Perhaps Terra is not dying, but evolving into something that no longer obeys the laws of planetary biology or even physics. A world that gives endlessly, not because of logistics or divine blessing, but because its very being has changed, because it is becoming something else. A planetary relic in the truest sense, not of the past, but of the future. A future we may not survive to understand. Beneath the screaming surface of Terra, under the hives, the cathedrals, and even the crawling veins of the palace itself, there are chambers no one speaks of. The black cells. No map records them. No authority claims them. Not even the Adeptus Custodes, for all their silent vigilance, openly acknowledge these places. Yet they exist. They must. Too many vanishings. Too many anomalies. Too many whispered fragments traded like heretical currency between inquisitors too frightened to investigate further. These aren't simple oubliettes or holding chambers. They are vaults, prisons, holding something deeper than memory, older than empire, and perhaps more dangerous than chaos itself. The first mention comes from the journals of a rogue Mechanicus explorator named Epsil Varn, disavowed and executed for blasphemy nearly 4,000 years ago. In his final, fragmented entries, he speaks of being invited into a research conclave beneath the southern sprawl of the imperial palace. He describes kilometers of forgotten hallways lined with adamantium and wreathed in silence, where no vox signals worked and time seemed to stretch. What he found at the end of that descent was not a secret weapon or forbidden tech. It was a room made of glass-black stone, lit from within by an eerie radiance, where a human skeleton hovered in the air, untouched by gravity or decay. Varn claimed it whispered in his mind, not in words but in emotions. Loneliness, hunger, purpose. His account was erased from all official records. But it's not the only one. The Inquisition maintains sealed archives of similar incidents, entire retinues of acolytes disappearing during routine relic retrievals. Tech priests who descend into lower vaults only to return days later changed, quieter, more reverent, and unable to recall what they found. In some cases, these individuals begin to speak in tongues long thought extinct, languages from Terra's prehistory, or worse, dialects that bear uncanny resemblance to Necron command cants and ancient Eldari soul runes. None can explain how they know them. What these black cells contain is uncertain. Some believe they are sites of planetary trauma, scars from when the Emperor reforged Terra, places where the past bled so deeply into the stone that it cannot be healed. Others think they are prisons, not for individuals but for concepts, ideas too dangerous to be allowed freedom. This aligns with a particularly terrifying theory proposed in hidden Ordo Malleus documents, that some of these vaults house memories, not bodies. Fragments of thought, cut from ancient minds, kept alive and dangerous. Trapped not because of what they are, but because of what they might infect, the minds of those who touch them. And then there is the Custodes connection. While the Emperor's golden guardians are rarely seen outside the palace, their presence within these forbidden zones is constant. not simply as guards, but as watchers. There are recorded sightings, fleeting, always denied, of entire phalanxes descending into lightless pits, bearing weapons not in standard Imperial armories. Devices that hum in the presence of warp energy, but also resonate with something else. Something that does not fit any known Xenos or demon classification. Some whisper that the custodes are not protecting the Emperor from outside threats, but Terra from what sleeps beneath him. In one of the most cryptic logs ever partially decrypted from the dark vaults of the Ordo Chronos, a phrase appears again and again. The wound of stone. It is never explained. But accompanying references suggest it is a location, perhaps not a single place, but a network, a kind of planetary nervous system embedded deep within Terra, formed not by nature, but by will. Whether that will was the Emperor's or something else is unclear. Some say the wound is the result of ancient war, a battle fought in the depths before the rise of man, between entities that used thought as weapons and memory as shields. What's even more disturbing is the way these black cells move. Reports from deep Mechanicus scanners, once dismissed as malfunction, show slight shifts in geological density beneath the palace over time. Vaults that were mapped years ago are no longer where they should be. Others appear suddenly, as if phasing into being. This suggests the cells aren't static. They migrate, or worse, they're alive, adaptive, purposeful. A recent suppressed mission by a radical faction of the Ordo Xenos, dubbed Operation Umbral Clasp, attempted to infiltrate one such vault during a momentary power fluctuation in the throne's outer conduits. Only one member returned. She emerged blind, every tooth shattered, fingers fused together. Her last words before her heart failed were recorded and later erased from all but a single transcript. The stone remembers what it was. So what does this mean for the rest of Terra? That perhaps the foundation of humanity's greatest world isn't built on stone at all, but on secrets, on thoughts buried so deeply they have weight. That the planet itself may be a tomb not for the dead, but for ideas too ancient and dangerous to be destroyed. The black cells are not just relics, they are reminders. That Terra is not just the origin of mankind, it is the jailer of something older. And the locks are whispering. Among the strangest and most persistent fringe theories surrounding Terra is the belief that it was never a singular world to begin with. That what we call Holy Terra, the ancient Earth, cradle of humanity, may in fact be a fabrication, a composite, a manufactured celestial structure pieced together not by chance or tectonic fate, but by deliberate, forgotten design. The idea seems absurd at first, but the evidence, or at least the pattern of anomalies, whispers otherwise. The crust of Terra is riddled with inconsistencies. Geological layers abruptly shift in density, composition, and isotopic age. Entire strata simply do not correspond to the expected timeline of planetary evolution. Some sections suggest organic sedimentation. Others show the molecular signature of high-energy fusion or impact that could only occur under artificial circumstances. Mechanicus surveys have uncovered subcontinental plates that appear not to match, like puzzle pieces forced together. The equatorial belt is particularly suspect, with electromagnetic anomalies that behave like seams or welds. It's as if someone stitched together multiple planetary bodies and smoothed over the scars with time, ash, and fire. Ancient myths may hold veiled clues. Cults long since purged spoke of the joining of the three, a tale where three dying stars gave their bones to form a single world destined to birth divinity. The ecclesiarchy dismisses it as allegory, but some scholars, notably those within radical Ordo Chronos circles, have speculated that the myth refers to a literal celestial event, perhaps a triplanetary fusion in ancient prehistory. They point to gravitational anomalies in Sol's planetary orbit, minute fluctuations that suggest Terra's mass doesn't align with what it should be for a planet of its age and position. Then there's the disturbing lack of certain planetary features. Terra has no natural moon anymore. Luna is a dead, artificial shell, its original surface long since converted into fortress cities and Mechanicus excavation zones. But theories persist that Luna was not always a satellite. Some believe it was once a fragment of Terra itself, or perhaps one of the other planets joined into the whole. There are sealed Mechanicus logs referencing massive subterranean chambers beneath Luna's crust, some of which appear to be keyed to planetary signals from Terra, as if the two were once parts of the same machine. More radical still is the theory that Terra is not natural at all, but a construct, a macrostructure built by some civilization so ancient and advanced that even the men of iron feared them. This idea was once confined to apocalyptic cults and discredited xenoarchaeologists, but fragments of Dark Age records, buried deep in data vaults under Mars, refer to the Foundation world, a planet-sized device seeded with psychic resonance fields, capable of sustaining or extinguishing entire species. It matches no known planet in recorded galactic history, except Terra. And what of the Emperor? Is it coincidence that he chose Terra, or did he return to it? One chilling theory holds that the Emperor didn't rise on Terra by accident, that he was called, drawn by the buried heartbeat of something forgotten, that his victory in the Unification Wars was not a conquest, but a reclamation. Some even believe he found evidence during his campaign, vast vaults already in place, untouched by time or entropy, machines that did not react to his armies, but to him, as if they were waiting, as if he was not their master, but their key. There's also the question of the planet's magnetic field, or rather the way it fluctuates in unnatural patterns. During certain warp surges, Terra's poles reverse polarity for brief intervals, often corresponding with unexplained psychic outbursts or anomalies in the Astronomican's beam. These fluctuations are too regular to be coincidence. Some posit that the planet itself is not simply resisting the warp, but conducting it. That it was engineered to harmonize with the immaterium in ways we still cannot understand. And if we accept, even momentarily, that Terra is not what it seems, then what does that say about the Imperium? About the very structure of human destiny? If the Emperor sits on a throne not atop mankind's birthplace, but upon a machine, one designed to manipulate souls, energy, and fate, then everything changes. It casts doubt on the origin of humanity itself. Were we truly born here or bred here? Was Terra a cradle or a crucible? In the deepest vaults of the Ordo Redactus, there is said to be a map, not of continents or hives, but of resonance fields. Invisible zones of psychic influence spread across the planet in patterns too perfect for natural occurrence. They intercept precise locations: the palace, Mount Ararat, the black cliffs of Anthanaeum, and a ruined desert where no civilization has ever thrived, but where time itself seems hesitant. What lies at the center of these patterns is unknown. The custodes ensure it remains so. So we ask again, was Terra always a planet, or is it something more? Something made? Something chosen or condemned? And if it is artificial, then by whom? And for what purpose? The truth may be that humanity was never the master of Terra. We are the inheritors of a world built for gods, and we are trespassing. Among the many schisms of belief within the Adeptus Mechanicus, none are more taboo or more closely guarded than the secrets surrounding Terra's core. To the wider Imperium, the cult Mechanicus is simply the priesthood of Mars, engineers and technologists cloaked in red robes, their bodies a fusion of flesh and sacred steel. But within the deepest circles of their hierarchy, beyond even fabricator generals and magi dominus, lies a more esoteric doctrine. One that suggests Terra itself, the most sacred world in all of human history, holds within it a machine not built by mankind, but for it, or perhaps against it. They call it the Sacred Core. No official records confirm its existence. It is not on any Mechanicus star chart. It is not catalogued in the Nospheric archives of Mars or included in the Codex Arcanus of the Forge worlds. But stories persist, passed in encrypted cant, shared only between the most senior members of the tech priesthood. Whispers of a machine embedded in Terra's mantle, too vast to comprehend, too old to dismantle, and too holy to question. Not because it is sacred in the traditional sense, but because it terrifies them. The belief among some factions of the cult Mechanicus is that this machine existed long before the rise of humanity. Some say it predates the old ones. That Terra was selected not as a birthplace, but as a casing, a sheath for something that was already here, a fragment of a dead god, perhaps, a reactor of psychic gravity, a prison for a concept that could never be allowed to escape, and over it, nature laid a mask. Atmosphere, water, life, the illusion of a planet, and later, humanity arrived, colonized, evolved. But they were always trespassers, living atop something they could neither understand nor name. The Adeptus Mechanicus do not speak of this openly, but certain actions betray their knowledge. For instance, the vast tunnels bored by the Mechanicus beneath the palace are closely monitored, not for threats from within, but to ensure they do not drill too deep. Access to the lower mantle sections, especially Zone Theta Nix and the Null Mantle Relay sectors, is restricted even to Archmagi. Tech priests who attempt unsanctioned exploration vanish without record. Or worse, return changed, with no memory, no voice, and corrupted data souls that cannot be purged. Some Magi believe the sacred core is alive, not in the organic sense, but as a system that thinks, or perhaps dreams. A data gestalt so ancient that even the warp cannot corrupt it. Others claim the core is inert, a failsafe waiting for a trigger condition that has not yet been met. What that trigger might be, planetary destruction, the Emperor's death, the rise of chaos as a galactic force, is unknown, but they fear it and worship it. Not with incense and prayers, but with silence, caution, and blind obedience. There are rumors of a tech priest sect known only as the Nullites. Fanatical, isolated, and supposedly extinct, the Nullites believed that Terra's true purpose was to maintain the core's dormancy. That the Emperor's placement on the throne was not divine happenstance, but a necessary positioning, a psychic anchor to prevent the core from waking. The Nullites argued that the Astronomicon is not just a beacon, but a psychic lock. That its continuous operation isn't to light the stars, but to suppress whatever lies beneath. These beliefs verge on heresy, and all references to the Nullites have been expunged from Martian databanks. But fragments remain. Black data sigils embedded in the heart code of Terra's oldest reactors. Engraved ciphers etched into the bones of buried cogitators. Even the Lex mechanics who analyze them do not understand their origin. The language is not binary, not technolingua. It's something older, something that resists decryption not because it is complex, but because it is recursive, self-consuming, designed to be forgotten. There are stories, possibly apocryphal, of a chamber deep beneath the palace where the Mechanicus conduct silent rites. No words are spoken, no data is logged. The rites are not directed at the Emperor or the Omnissiah. They are offerings of inaction. The priests enter, remain still for 77 minutes, and leave. Nothing is done, nothing is said, because in this doctrine, stillness is worship. Disturbing the core is the only sin, and so they honor it with silence, with stability, with fear. A few fringe elements of the Inquisition, particularly within the Ordo Machinum, have tried to investigate the sacred core. Most were blocked. Those who pushed further were reassigned, eliminated, or declared compromised. A few in their final transmissions spoke of something truly unsettling, seismic readings that respond to human thought. Pulse signatures from deep within the mantle that synchronize with the Emperor's heartbeat. Matter structures that rewrite themselves when observed too closely. The implication is staggering, that the core is not just ancient and alien. It is reactive, aware, and perhaps worse, waiting. For what? No one knows. But if the cult Mechanicus is correct, then the idea that Terra is simply the throne world is a lie of scale. The planet may in fact be the outer shell of a device so dangerous, so fundamental to the structure of reality, that the entire Imperium is nothing more than a containment protocol. And humanity? Humanity may be the warning label. Within the hallowed vaults of the Ecclesiarchy, amid mountains of scripture and miles of holy scroll, lies a secret archive known only to a handful of the most senior cardinals. This is not the Exalted Codex or the sacred manuscript repository. It is something else, a place where heresies go not to die, but to be buried and watched. They call it the Archive Obscurus, and within it are texts so blasphemous that merely reading them warrants execution. Yet these writings persist. They are not destroyed, because even the Ecclesiarchy, in its firebrand certainty, fears what these words might be warning against. And among the oldest, dustiest of these forbidden pages lies a cluster of texts revolving around a singular, disturbing idea, that Terra itself is not a holy world by merit, but by design. That its sacredness is not earned or bestowed, but inherent. That the planet is not just a place, it is a relic. A living, breathing, planetary-scale remnant of something divine or monstrous. Something that once was and now is not, or perhaps is waiting to be again. One text, known only as the Gospel of the Hollow Light, describes Terra as a vessel of divine mourning, a place not created to host life, but to mourn its absence. Its author, an unnamed pre-Ministorum prophet, writes of a core that weeps molten grief, and of mountains that shudder in silent prayer. Most scholars dismiss this as symbolic lunacy, but others, particularly within secret inquisitorial circles, have begun to connect these poetic verses to actual physical phenomena. Seismic tremors with no tectonic source, aurora-like effects that rise from the ground instead of the sky, and voices, always just beyond hearing, recorded in deep mantle echo scans. Another scripture, the Canticle of Bone and Flame, offers an even darker interpretation. It claims Terra was never meant for mankind at all. That long before the first Homo sapiens walked upright, Terra served as the tomb of a dead god, or a seed of one not yet born. The text is maddening in its cryptic symbolism, but repeated references to the god egg and the placenta of ash suggest a vision of the planet as a kind of incubator. That humanity's presence on Terra is not an accident, but a phase, a stage in something's gestation. The mainstream ecclesiarchy violently rejects such notions. Terra, they say, is sanctified because the emperor lived and ruled here. It is holy because his body, however broken, still dwells at its heart. But the more radical text suggests the inverse, that the emperor chose Terra not because it was holy, but because it was already something else. That his presence here is not an act of divine selection, but of necessity. That he is here to contain or nurture whatever Terra truly is. Heretical fringe cults expand this further. There are sects, long outlawed and purged, that worship the planet itself. Not the emperor, not the throne, but the soil, the rock, the memory embedded in strata. They speak of Terra as the womb world, the stone heart, the mother of silence. To them, the emperor is not a god, but a midwife, a caretaker ensuring the survival of something too vast to be born yet. Their rituals involve planting human bones in sacred geometries, feeding soil with psychic pain, and praying not upward but downward, into the crust, into the depths. Some within the Inquisition believe these sects were not eradicated but absorbed, that elements of the ecclesiarchy now quietly preserve these texts, not out of reverence but fear. If Terra is a vessel, or a god, a memory, or something worse, then the Imperium might not be protecting the galaxy. It might be incubating its end, or its next beginning. The implications echo through certain recent anomalies. Pilgrims standing barefoot on ancient flagstones who suddenly go blind, not from injury, but from a psychic overload of sacred visions they cannot process. Statues that sweat salt, not water. Altars that draw blood from the palms of those who touch them, even when unwounded. Ecclesiarchy auditors have recorded over 400 such cases in the last decade, many in sites untouched for millennia. These events cannot be explained by warp incursions or psychic bleed alone. Something deeper is moving, awakening, responding to worship it was never meant to receive. And then there are the dreams. High-ranking cardinals confessing in private that they wake in terror from visions of Terra, not as it is, but as it might be. A Terra with eyes, with a voice, with breath so vast it shakes the stars. What if faith is not building Terra into a sacred world, but feeding it, empowering it, changing it? What if the emperor knew this all along? What if the Golden Throne is not a prison nor a beacon, but a plug, holding back something that once ruled the void, or something that should? And what if the day comes when it no longer holds? What if the prayers, the sacrifices, the blood spilled by billions every hour across the Imperium, all flow downward, into the core, into the heart? What happens when the heart starts beating again? And will it be a god or a grave? There is something wrong with the mountains of Terra. Even amid the unimaginable scale of the imperial palace and the continent-spanning hive cities, the mountains of old Earth remain, shadows of a forgotten age. They rise through the ash skies like the broken ribs of a god, many of them encased in ceramite, their peaks carved into sanctuaries or gun platforms, their bases devoured by hive foundations. But look closely, and you'll see that these mountains defy nature. They do not follow known geological logic. Their shapes, their placements, even their internal structure, do not belong. Geologists, or what remains of the discipline in this age of decay and dogma, have long noticed discrepancies. Mountains that exist without surrounding fault lines. Ranges that appear too young, their rock unweathered despite millennia of exposure. Worse still are the reports from excavation teams that go beneath the roots of these peaks. They find cores not of stone, but of composite alloys, materials that resist all known forms of drilling, scanning, or analysis. Some emit faint vibrations, a low-frequency hum that ceases the moment it is recorded. The most infamous of these anomalies is Mount Ararat, a site considered sacred by multiple Proto-Terran faiths even before the rise of the Emperor. It now sits within a restricted zone under custodian control. No official explanation has ever been given for the continuous plasma shielding that envelops the mountain's summit, but legends persist that deep within there is a chamber older than the crust, filled with light that doesn't cast shadows, that the mountain grows, not in mass but in depth, that its roots aren't geological but dimensional. This phenomenon is not isolated. The black cliffs of Anthonium, stretching along what was once the Atlantic Rift, display similar properties. Their strata do not follow any known sedimentation model. Core samples reverse polarity at random depths and in several cases appear to be mirror images of geological records found on other worlds. The implication, utterly denied by the Mechanicus, is that these mountains may have been copied or imported, as if pieces of other planets were grafted onto Terra, and the seams are beginning to reveal themselves. Then, there are the anomalies reported during warp surges. Pilgrims climbing sacred mountains during major astronomical alignments have recorded impossible visions, peaks bending toward the sky like valleys that become mouths, cliffs that seem to breathe. One particularly disturbing account comes from a former astropath, now catatonic, who claimed that, while meditating near Mount Xi'an, he felt the mountain watching him, not metaphorically, but as an awareness. Ancient, cold, and hungry. Certain Ordo Malleus agents believe the mountains are not natural at all, but manifestations of contained warp structures. That they are fixed demonic residues, places where the immaterium once leaked through, solidified by unknown technology or ancient acts of will. This would explain the behavior of some of the peaks, how they seem to change subtly over time, not eroding, but evolving. Images taken centuries apart reveal minor but undeniable differences in shape, orientation, even height, as if the mountains are not wearing down, but growing into something. Even more troubling are the reports from Custodes veterans, rare and quickly silenced, who speak of subterranean patrols along mountain routes that should not exist. One such tunnel discovered beneath what remains of the Himalaysian plateau was said to spiral downward for over 20 kilometers before ending in a perfectly smooth chamber of impossible geometry. Inside, they found a sphere. Floating, humming. The team's chronometers disagreed on how long they remained. Some recalled minutes, others, days. All their data was corrupted. The tunnel collapsed the moment they returned. The ecclesiarchy predictably declares all such stories apocryphal. They teach that the mountains are testaments to the emperor's patience, obstacles meant to remind mankind of the struggle to ascend. But deep within the Schola Psychana, where psychic anomalies are studied under extreme censorship, there is a forbidden curriculum. One that suggests the mountains of Terra are not obstacles. They are beacons, anchors, points of containment. Each mountain in this model corresponds to a specific warp frequency. Together they form a grid, an invisible lattice that spans the globe, keeping something bound. Not just beneath the crust, but within the planet's identity. The mountain ranges are not just terrain, they are interfaces. And here lies the most terrifying theory of all, that the mountains are not remnants of planetary formation, but nodes in a massive slumbering psychic machine. A device so vast and so buried in time that it now passes for nature. That every step taken on Terra, every ritual, every sacrifice, all of it echoes through this network, feeding it, awakening it, preparing it. And what happens when that system finishes booting? What if the mountains rise not just higher, but open? What if they are not geological at all, but biological? Not scars, but eyes. There is a psychic gravity to Terra that no other world seems to possess. It's not just symbolic, not just the product of 10,000 years of imperial dogma. Psychers feel it, even before they learn who or what the emperor is. Before they learn of the throne or the Astronomicon or the black ships, they dream of Terra. They whisper its name in sleep. They sketch its outline in dust or blood or ash. For those born across the stars, far from its burning skies, Terra still pulls them, not just as a location, but as a presence. A call. Why? Some claim it is the Astronomicon, that impossible psychic beacon flaring from the Golden Throne, burning through the immaterium like a second sun. But this cannot fully explain the phenomenon. There are children born with psychic gifts who feel Terra's presence even when the Astronomicon is blocked, even when warp storms rage and light is swallowed. They do not sense a beacon, they sense a source. This has led some to a terrible conclusion, that Terra itself is a psychic entity. Not in the sense of being alive, not yet, but in the sense of being charged, saturated, transformed by millennia of proximity to the warp, to the Emperor, to uncountable acts of pain, worship, sacrifice, mutation, and death. No other world has witnessed so much of humanity's psychic footprint. The soil is steeped in martyrdom. The air is thick with prayers. Every hive level is layered in generations of terror, awe, faith, and agony, and all of it bleeds into the warp. Even the navigators, those most secretive of warp guides, have long known that the immaterium bends differently near Terra. It's not just the Astronomicon. The very substance of the warp seems calmer, more focused, less volatile near the Sol system. Some whisper that Terra acts as a harmonic node, drawing in ambient psychic energy from across the galaxy. The planet doesn't just emit psychic power, it accumulates it. This might explain the strange clustering of powerful psychers on Terra. Even beyond those brought in chains on the black ships, there are individuals born within Terra's own hives, often to seemingly non-psychic parents, who manifest terrifying abilities. Whole sectors have been purged after spontaneous outbreaks of uncontrolled psychic activity. Some inquisitors suspect that Terra itself is birthing psychers now, that the planet's resonance is so intense it rewrites DNA in utero. The human body becomes a tuning fork, vibrating with energies it cannot control. There are darker implications. The Ordo Psychana keeps encrypted records of dreams shared by astropaths across thousands of light years, visions of Terra whispering to them, beckoning them home, promising silence, purpose, or oblivion. These dreams often increase in frequency before mass demonic incursions. The theory, whispered in radical circles, is that Terra has become a psychic magnet not just for human minds, but for warp entities. That daemons are not merely drawn by the Astronomicon's light, they are attracted to Terra's mind. Because if the planet has become a conduit, a nexus of human psychic resonance, then it is not passive. It is changing, shifting under the weight of its own psychic load. This would align with reports of environmental anomalies, stones that record thought, ruins that echo with emotion, entire districts where psychers are overwhelmed by phantom sensations not their own. In these places, Terra itself appears to have a memory. Some magi believe the planet has reached what they call the synaptic threshold, the point at which accumulated psychic trauma forms a quasi-sentient field. Not a consciousness, but a tendency, a personality forming in the spaces between minds, the shape of 10,000 years of belief, an echo of the Emperor, or perhaps something older. The ecclesiarchy, of course, declares all this heresy. To suggest that Terra is alive, or worse, aware, would undermine centuries of religious dogma. But even they cannot explain certain miracles, shrines that radiate unnatural calm, pilgrims who are healed of incurable diseases the moment they kneel on sacred stone, statues that weep blood only during certain lunar alignments. These are not merely divine. They are responses. The most disturbing reports come from the Schola Progenium, where psychic orphans are trained, or culled. Some children, barely verbal, have been known to whisper, "She hears us," when asked about the Emperor. Not he. She. As if referring not to the god on the throne, but to the planet itself. Could it be that Terra, through sheer saturation of psychic experience, is developing a soul? And if so, whose soul is it? The Emperor's? Mankind's? Something else entirely? Perhaps this is the final irony, that in creating a psychic empire, in channeling untold billions of souls through sacrifice and worship, the Imperium has created a god after all. Not in the sky, but under our feet. They say the Adeptus Custodes never truly sleep. They say they are the Emperor's shadow, silent, golden, unbreakable. But what they never say is what they are truly guarding, not publicly, not even to each other. Because while the world sees them as the eternal protectors of the Golden Throne, their vigil extends far deeper. into places no light reaches, beneath the marble and adamantium of the palace, beneath even the corpse of the emperor. They walk in tunnels that curve impossibly. They patrol chambers where the air has never been breathed. And what they are guarding, or containing, may be older than Terra itself. The common perception of the custodes is flawed. They are not an army. Not in the traditional sense. They are wardens, observers, executioners of a duty so specific and so absolute that even the Inquisition dares not interfere. They rarely speak. They rarely leave. And when they do, it is because something has broken through the veil of secrecy that cloaks the palace from the inside out. There are hundreds, perhaps thousands, of chambers beneath the throne world known only to them. Zones that do not appear on maps, even in the Mechanicus's most sacred data archives. Some of these chambers are said to predate the Emperor's rise. Others were created by his own hand. But the custodes don't distinguish. They guard all of them with equal silence. The assumption is that they are protecting the Emperor's physical form, but the truth may be far more complex and far more dangerous. Whispers from within the rarest strata of the Ordo Secretum suggest that the Emperor is not the only presence held beneath the throne. That during the Unification Wars, he unearthed things buried in Terra's mantle, relics of prehistory, or perhaps alien in origin, or worse, extratemporal. Things that do not fit into linear time. Entities or objects not native to our galaxy, or our laws of being. These were not destroyed. They were not studied. They were locked away. And the custodians were charged not with understanding them, but with making sure no one ever did. Some of these vaults are guarded in ritual shifts that last for centuries. A single custodian posted outside a sealed door, unmoving, unspeaking, for the length of 10 lifetimes. No one is allowed inside, not even other custodians, and when the relief finally arrives, there is no exchange, no report. The old simply walks away. The new takes their place. It has always been this way, but there have been breaches. Records, buried in the black vaults of the Inquisition, tell of rare incursions, times when something within the palace moved that should not have, when psychic readings spiked with no external cause, when entire cohorts of custodians vanished. Not in battle, but in the act of observation, as if what they were watching had turned, finally, to watch them. One such event, codenamed Event Echo Veil, resulted in the sudden death of every astropath in the Segmentum Solar. The official cause was a warp storm, but no storm was ever recorded. Then there are the silent parades. Every few decades, the custodes march in total silence through the deepest levels of the palace, bearing relics covered in shrouds, their golden armor dimmed, their faces unreadable. No ceremony, no record, just the sound of their footfalls echoing in halls that were never meant for human ears. Some believe they are transferring containment, moving something that must never be left unattended. Others think it's ritual, a reminder to it that they are still watching. And the Emperor? The Golden Throne is their focal point. But there are those who believe he is not the only one who sits there. That beneath the throne, beneath the light of the Astronomicon, is another chamber. Not a tomb, not a sanctum, but a mirror. A place where something else, perhaps not alive but not dead, is kept tethered. Balanced by his will, or his body, or his sacrifice. This might explain the custodians' absolute refusal to speak of their vigil. Why even in the face of galactic catastrophe, they do not abandon Terra. Why they did not join the Great Crusade in full. Why they remain unbroken, unfailing, unyielding. Because what they guard is not the past. It is not even the Emperor's future. It is the unseen cost of Terra's survival. Perhaps this is the final function of the custodes, not just to protect humanity from its enemies, but to protect humanity itself from the truth of what lies beneath its cradle. Because if those doors ever open, if the wards fail, if the Golden Throne falters even once, it may not be the Emperor who rises. It may be something far older, something that has been dreaming beneath Terra for eons, watching, waiting, and it may already be awake. To understand what Terra is becoming, we must look at the very nature of its exposure, not to time or even to the brutal weight of empire, but to the immaterium itself. No other planet in the galaxy has endured such relentless, unending contact with the warp without descending into madness or demonic incursion. For 10,000 years, the Astronomicon has burned from its surface, warping the veil of reality and flooding the area with raw psychic light. This would destroy any other world, but not Terra. Terra absorbs it. And more than that, it seems to change because of it. We must confront the possibility that the matter of Terra, its very physical substance, is no longer what it once was. That under the continuous pressure of the warp, under the ceaseless psychic rituals, sacrifices, and warp light emissions of the throne, the planet is mutating, not in the way of chaos, not corrupted, but transfigured into something that sits between the material and the immaterial, a hybrid state, a new form of planetary existence. The first evidence lies in the stone itself. Geological surveys, when permitted, reveal anomalies impossible by natural or technological means. Certain veins of bedrock display crystalline formations that should only be found in the upper warp layers. These formations respond to thought. They shimmer faintly in the presence of emotion. When removed from Terra, they dull, as if severed from a psychic bloodstream. Attempts to replicate them have failed, even in high-psi forge complexes. In the outer crust near the throne's reach, metal fixtures have begun to twist without mechanical input. The Mechanicus has logged hundreds of cases of sacred alloys, adamantium, plasteel, or calcum, changing molecular alignment in subtle but consistent ways. When these changes are mapped, they form runes. Not linguistic, not functional, but symbolic, like a planet trying to speak or dream or record something beyond comprehension. Even the biosphere, what little remains of it, has begun to shift. In regions where atmosphere is maintained, flora exhibits strange properties. Certain mosses radiate low-grade psychoresonance. Algae colonies near the thronicide sewer vents adapt to emotional stimuli, growing in proximity to fear, shrinking in joy. Some organisms now only live in Terra's warp-saturated zones, unique to the planet, impossible to replicate off-world, as if biologically attuned to an ambient psychic field. More disturbing is the increasing instability of physics in some palace-adjacent vaults. Tech priests have documented areas where gravity fails, not abruptly, but subtly. Time stutters. Chronometers desynchronize by fractions of seconds, growing more chaotic the longer they remain. And always these phenomena occur in concentric patterns surrounding the Astronomicon, as if its presence is not merely illuminating the warp, but drawing it closer, thinning the layers between real space and the other. A handful of inquisitorial researchers, now silenced or executed, proposed the concept of Terra null, a theoretical model in which the planet is no longer a stable mass, but a semi-psychic construct. In this state, the laws of matter still apply, but only because the Emperor's will, and the inertia of collective belief, continues to enforce them. The warp does not flow over Terra, it is within it, saturated, structured, anchored by faith and ritual and pain. This would explain why so many anomalies only manifest when the population surges with emotion, during Mass, during planetary alignments, during holy days. Terra reacts to the thoughts of its people. This is not simple corruption. This is not demon world behavior. It is something else, something convergent. Terra is not falling to chaos. It is not ascending to purity. It is becoming a fusion of warp and matter, of soul and stone, of thought and gravity. Not a battlefield between realms, but a synthesis. This brings us to the final, most unsettling possibility. What if this process is intentional? What if the Emperor, in designing the Golden Throne, knew this would happen? That the constant psychic output, the saturation of sacrifice, the enshrinement of belief, all of it, would trigger a transmutation not of his body, but of the planet itself. That he was not merely guiding ships through the stars, but evolving Terra into something new? Some suggest that Terra is becoming the first post-planetary entity. Not alive in the traditional sense, but aware. Capable of responding to the warp, not with violence or decay, but with integration. A planetary soul forming in the crucible of empire and faith. A mind made from echoes. A god not forged by birth or divine act, but grown through the weight of 10,000 years of devotion and death. And what happens when the process completes? What becomes of a world that is no longer just a place, but a being? What becomes of humanity when its cradle becomes its equal, or its judge? Some truths cannot be carried by memory alone. They must be embedded in stone, etched in bone, preserved in silence so heavy that words would shatter it. Terra may be the most sacred world in the galaxy, but it is also the most secret. And of all the secrets buried beneath its mountains, its palace, its screams and cathedrals, perhaps the most blasphemous is this: that the world may no longer be a world at all. It is not just the psychic saturation, not just the anomalies, the vaults, the silent custodians, the unnatural endurance of soil and breath and ash. It is the pattern, the convergence, the way every layer of Terra's agony, every war, every sacrifice, every whispered prayer, every molecule burned in the name of the Emperor seems to be shaping something. Not randomly, not chaotically, but deliberately, as if guided by an unseen architecture, as if following a blueprint no mortal was meant to read. The theory, radical and deadly to speak aloud, is that Terra is undergoing apotheosis. Not as a people, not even as an empire, but as a planet. That its constant exposure to the warp, to the Emperor's mind, to the sacrifice of untold billions, is reshaping its identity. Not metaphorically, literally. That it is transitioning into a new form of existence, a divine relic in motion, a planetary demigod, a consciousness coalescing through stone and thought and soul. The most extreme believers call it the becoming. They argue that what we call Holy Terra is not the origin of mankind, but its final shape. That the Emperor is not merely guarding humanity's future, he is birthing it. Not in individuals, but in the planet itself. That all of this, the Imperium, the throne, the Astronomicon, the endless sacrifice, is part of a ritual not yet complete, a galactic-scale rite of planetary apotheosis. Evidence lies in the deep resonance fields measured around the palace, fields that pulse with rhythm, as if echoing a heart too vast and slow for human ears. In the dreams of psychers drawn to Terra, who speak of a presence underfoot that is beginning to think. In the warp reflections that show Terra not as it is, but as a burning sphere of light and will and memory. As if the planet has already begun to appear differently in the immaterium. As if it is being recognized by something. The most unsettling implication is that this transformation may be irreversible. That even if the Emperor perished, the momentum of belief, blood, and psychic resonance would continue. That Terra would finish what it began. That the planet, now half immaterial, would wake fully. Not in place of the Emperor, but as him. Or something worse. Some fear it. Others worship it. There are pilgrim cults who lie prostrate on the stone, hoping to be absorbed. There are radical mechanicist sects who believe Terra's matter should be harvested like holy relics, dispersed across the galaxy to seed similar transformations. And there are inquisitors who want the planet quarantined, silenced, lobotomized before it completes whatever it is becoming. Because if Terra becomes a god, then what becomes of the Imperium? Does it ascend? Or does it burn? The final truth is this: we do not know what Terra is made from anymore. We only know that it is no longer stone, soil, and sky. It is made of sacrifice, of memory, of belief, of pain and empire and grief. And perhaps one day, when it has finally become what it was always meant to be, it will open its eyes and remember everything. If you followed this long descent into the mystery of Terra, you're the kind of soul this channel was made for. Subscribe to stay close as we keep digging into the lore, the secrets, and the shadowed future of Warhammer 40k. And remember, some truths are too heavy for the stars, but not for us.